I'd like to talk about states of emergency. The 45th President of the United States declared one today in the United States in relation to that wall. The Herald, under its new ownership, more or less declared a state of emergency with people smugglers allegedly planning to test the incoming Prime Minister, Bill Shorten. Well, I would like to declare a state of emergency in our own country, a real one. The state of emergency here is that government is missing in action. Government is asleep at the wheel. The coalition in recent years has crashed the car. Labor, which will surely be elected at the coming election, may repair that car, but we really need a new car. And that is the theme, that is the point of Together. We need to rebuild our Commonwealth. We need to rebuild Australian politics. Australia, thanks to the policies and the government action and inaction of the last generation, is now effectively, for all meaningful purposes, ruled by its markets and the people who dominate those markets. The country now benefits the more wealthy consistently to the detriment of the not so wealthy. And the reality is that that is most of us living in this country. Australian politics needs to connect with the ordinary lives of people and govern for them, for us and our communities. Government needs to begin in our hearts and emanate from there, not from a distant Canberra trapped in its own games. We need to rediscover the public and pay for it because it is a good investment. We need to prioritise public health, public education and public transport. And if we're actually going to do anything about the very real emergency of climate change, we will only do that with public action and with effective government. We need seriously to develop an inventory of good things for the entirety of the country. And we need to look at the things that we might include in our national asset base, like the Opera House, like the Harbour Bridge, like the Ghan, like Bondi Beach, Uluru, like the Reef. All things that we either made or own together. That is where government needs to start. That is what government needs to be about. We need, as I say, and I will keep saying, we need to rebuild our common wealth. We need to invest in us, our shared assets, our shared infrastructure, our hospitals, our schools, everything. We need to think climate economy. Our communities, our livelihoods, our planet, our kids depend upon thinking climate economy. We need to think that defence is spent. Why do we spend so much on defence? We need to spend some, but why so much when we need money for climate collapse, for our hospitals, our schools, for our common wealth? We need other things. We need other things, and I will try to develop a series of ideas that cut through the fog and the sludge of our political debate and its coverage in the media. We need things like a business shark tank. We need to pick winners in our business sector, in technology, in energy and agriculture today. We do that currently by defending existing businesses, by propping them up. But we need to look to the next generation and beyond and say, well, where is our prosperity coming from? What are we all going to participate in our communities? What's Australia going to look like? We need to pick those winners based on the communities that we imagine, and we need to back them. We need to look at our homes as homes and not houses. Bricks and mortar are for human beings. They are the basis of our community, not a means of investment. And if we're going to invest in something with our homes, it's a good life, not a good return. Looking more globally at our budget and our public assets, we need a fair dinkum future fund. And I will shamelessly use vernacular in this fashion. We currently have $150 or $180 billion in our future fund, depending on how you measure it. Norway has $1 trillion, a much smaller country. And $1 trillion, coincidentally, is the asset base of the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, which used to be entirely government owned. It's time to get real about our future fund and direct it in the right way. We need to ask some serious questions of our better off people. Many of them regard themselves as philanthropists. And I would say, hello, philanthropists. I would say, hello, you want to give back? Well, first of all, that's a good thing. But first of all, ask yourself, why? Why did you take in the first place? What is wrong with paying tax and contributing to the commonwealth of the country that benefits everybody living within it? What is wrong with that? And they are the questions that I want to throw into the pond of Australian politics. And other issues like water currently. I've talked loosely about an amnesty for irrigators, and people have said, what are you talking about, Mark? Well, I think the irrigators need to give water back to us and our rivers now. Right now. I think our governments, federal and state, should actually use their emergency powers and force the irrigators to do it anyway. But if John Howard can succeed and be celebrated, quite rightly, for his gun amnesty, why can't we have another amnesty that deals with a much bigger problem on this driest of continents? We can't just spend an hour a day tic-tacking on social media complaining, which is what a lot of us do. And we're really just hoping. We can't just hope. We need serious action, and we can't wait for a royal commission. The need is far too urgent. We need to invest in water as a common asset, part of our common wealth, something that we all own together. I mean, our rivers, they don't really belong to us. We belong to them. And these basic shifts in consciousness, I think, are important, because if you got up in federal parliament currently and started talking about belonging to rivers, you would stand out. And in the best way. We need to start talking like that, because we need a politics that begins in our hearts and emanates from there. And it results in those sorts of shifts in perception. We need a whole bunch of new ideas. Ideas like tax is the new black. Tax, let's say it, tax is an investment in us, who we are together as people living on this land. To put it another way, tax cuts cut you the most. The reality is that our companies and the better off among us need to pay more tax. The awareness of this obvious need across Western democracies is rising everywhere. In the US, with the Progressive Democrats, with people in the British Labor Party, it is patently obvious. And we're talking about, like Liz was talking about, evidence-based science and medicine. I've always wondered what science and medicine were based on before evidence became the platform. But in any event, we need evidence-based policies in our budget and economic planning. Australia is a low-tax country, but we are basically consistently lied to. The coalition moves the debate further and further to the right, further away from reality, and Labor, sadly, has followed them for a generation. And it is an absolute race to the bottom. Tax is the new black. I think that line might land. And specifically in tax, we might introduce things like a flagfall tax. So there's a lot of angst around companies that have enormous revenues, but then enormous offsets, who end up netting out to zero. Well, I say, let's have a flagfall tax. So if you end up in that net zero position, well, you should pay 10% anyway, because you're trading in Australia and it's a great place to run a business. So why don't you chip in for the privilege? And I would say the same thing about better off people. And many of my friends are better off Australians, trust me. And I say the same thing with various offsets and trusts. Many Australians who make heaps of money, who enjoy an incredible lifestyle that any king in human history would recognise as serious luxury. But still, you end up paying little or no tax. I think it's fundamentally wrong, even if you are already paying other forms of tax. At the end of the year, tip in to the Bicky jar, 10%. That's your flag fall if you want to ride in the cab called Australia. And if tax is the new black, extend it to the land. I think the land tax idea is an idea whose time has come. There are enough people at the so-called centre of Australian politics who already back this idea. It's such an obvious thing to do. Apart from anything else, it's where most of the wealth in this country has accumulated ever, and particularly over the last generation. The acceleration of wealth has been concentrated in land. That's where it needs to sit. And I suggest that some of that land tax, a portion of it, should be what I call a treaty levy. I think Australia needs, in order to create a future for us together that includes everybody, all of our communities, all of our identities, we need to reconcile with our past, the truth of our history and what actually occurred here. And I'll argue this toe-to-toe with anybody in public life. Very few countries can properly stand on their own 2 feet and live well without reconciling with the past, without understanding how we got here. The level of delusion in Australia about what occurred on this land is really appalling. And this is not white guilt. This is not a black armband view of history. It's evidence-based. It's factual. It's something that happened in the suburbs of Sydney and in every nook and cranny, on every station and around every river of this land. And until Australia reconciles to those facts, we will not have a real future on this land because our feet will not be firmly resting upon it. And as time goes on, particularly over the next generation, our feet will start to quiver. Our feet will shake because the story is coming. The truth is already with us, and the people of Australia just have to listen. And I think that is at the heart of Together and what I would like the party to be about. And the idea of a treaty levy is to come up with a very specific, concrete idea as part of a land tax, so it would run with the land and people chip into a fund which helps develop Indigenous communities, which is controlled by Indigenous leaders. Australia has to stop the colonial model of administration which affects Indigenous lives across this country every hour of every day in every week of the year. We need to change. We need an absolute sea change. And I think a debate around the treaty levy and making it happen as part of a land tax is a great way of getting there. And apart from anything else, I would love to hear what the leaders of all of our political parties have to say about the proposal. I would love to hear them articulate a counter-argument. Bring it on. While we're on the budget, just let me say that I would double the budget of the ABC and the SBS. Why? Because cutting the budget of the ABC is a form of self-harm. Doubling the budget of the ABC would, for those of you interested in facts and figures and numbers, would put the ABC roughly on a par with the budgetary allocation for the BBC, if you look at the relative populations of Australia and the UK. So doubling it would just enable us to create a valuable cultural resource, or to extend it, and then also to restore the ABC to its soft diplomacy role. That's been radically circumscribed in recent years, and Australia needs a voice around the world, especially in Asia, through radio and television, and we need to fund it. Why? Because it's a fantastic investment, and when Australia needs to reach out, particularly to Asia, what better way to do it than through the ABC? I'm not sure Sky or Fox are up to the job. Other mantras that I would repeat endlessly, like jobs and growth. Oh no, that's been used. Instead of jobs and growth, I talk about communities and careers. We live in communities and working for them is a career. That's not how we currently construct working lives for people in Australia. We don't think of our communities as the location of our career. In my judgment, we should. And basically, to me, politics is a battle of ideas, and that's an important idea. On a similar level, we need evidence-based job stats, real job stats, okay? Our unemployment numbers are rubbish. They completely mislead us about the level of unemployment and the level of underemployment in our cities and our regions. In any event, there are far too many of us, the old and the young especially, who have too little to productively do with their time and skills. It's bad for them, it's bad for everybody together. And I've lost sound again. But that's okay, we'll keep going. I would also propose, thanks very much, Jonathan. I propose the creation of everlasting batteries. I propose a new start for welfare. Do you like that? We all share a human right to a basic life, and it's time to move to a basic income for all. We need to have a serious look at the system of campaign and political party funding. We need a completely new regime that allows only funding from individuals or from the state itself. Full stop.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to go back to my notes at this juncture. I seriously believe that Australia is a lot closer than we realise to moving seriously on climate change, on climate collapse, call it what you will. We are definitely producing renewable energy at a rate that will allow us to transition to a clean, green and electric future. I think the incoming government will help that process, and I think that the grassroots activism of kids in particular and others, smaller parties like ICAN here, and the whole movement across the country will make that happen. To me, the future is clean, green and electric, and the Volvo diesel that I'm currently driving will be my last carbon car. We need to put the party back in politics. That's why I chose Pinky Beecroft, my old mate, to entertain us last night. He thought he was an inappropriate person to help launch a political campaign. I think he's perfect. We need to embrace the eccentric, the unusual, the wild and the bold.
Yes.
That's what we need to do, okay? We need to enjoy our lives. Where is the fun in Ozpol? As Charlie said earlier, there are pathetic attempts at humour, but there's nothing funny about Australian politics. You know, I really do want to see people enjoying themselves. What's the point of our lives? I mean, we need to live our lives fully and truly together, not as atomised individuals, but fully fledged, connected human beings. We all want to live and love. We all want to be loved. We all want to have good work, you know, something useful to do, and then have something in our spare time to do that we really enjoy. Lives should be enjoyable. Do you get that sense from Australian politics currently? Is anyone in Parliament enjoying themselves deeply? Where does this fear of enjoyment come from? There is some dreadful puritanism deep within us still in this country. We need to properly liberate ourselves from that. We need to work hard. We need to build a future. We need to do serious, constructive things. But while we're doing it, we need to be joyful. We need to enjoy our lives together, or there's no bloody point. So I would like to thank all of you for participating in the first Together Party Conference. I'd like to thank all of the volunteers who've made this happen. I'd like to thank all of the speakers who are all fantastic, would you not agree? I'd like to thank everybody who asked a question, who wrote down a thought bubble or a short 500-word essay which we're still typing up. Thank you. And in case you were wondering, it is unmanageably exhausting to run an event like this and to begin a political party, if you were wondering. I think we've all now earned a cup of tea or coffee, possibly a drink, a lemon, lime and bitters or something like that, a glass of milk or red milk in your case, John. But politics, we need to put the party back into politics, but it is a serious business, and I'm absolutely serious about making the most of Together and making a splash in Australian politics, because the system is broken, it needs to be disrupted. We have so many good people doing so many good things across every community in Australia, and it's about time federal parliament reflected that basic fact of life. And that's why I'm standing here, and thank you very much. Stick around, we'll be back after a short break.